In every encounter, we either give life or we drain it. There is no neutral exchange. Which are you? Givers are appreciated. And Paul is saying, man, I appreciate you guys. You cared for me over and over and over again. This is what Jesus talked about when he said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. We are in Philippians 4, and believe it or not, we are not going to get done with this book. We are not going to be done with this book yet. We have one more week, maybe two, okay? But because I want to take next week, and I want to focus on verse number 19, and then I think I'm going to take the week after and finish the book. And then after that, I don't know, okay? So anyway, we will go from there. But we'll obviously getting into the holiday season, and we'll deal with some stuff related to the holiday, and then maybe the first of the year we'll start something new, okay? But we are in this book of Philippians, and man, somebody said something to me last Sunday that really blessed me in so many ways. You know, this lady came up to me and she said, I'm glad we went through this book. I think that it's helped our church, and I think that our church has more joy as a result of it, because that's really the theme of this book. And I was so blessed to hear that from not an outside perspective, because she's in the church, but from somebody that's not on staff or doesn't do this for their job, to say, you know, I think there's a difference. So what that does for me is it encourages me that you're just not hearing it, but you're living it. You're not just hearing the word, but you're living the word. And you all are great listeners, and you are incredible to preach to in a positive way, but what would do all of our pastors' hearts even better is if not only you just hear it, but live it. And that's the goal of anybody that teaches you the word, is to not just have you hear it, but to live it. So we are getting into the last part of chapter 4. Now I want to kind of read this in context, okay? So last week we see what Paul says when he's talking about the offering that the church has sent him. And he says, but I rejoice, where I'm at verse number 10. It's not on the screen because I'm not at verse 14 yet, but let me just read these verses. But I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, if we took up an offering and we got a guy, we put a guy on a donkey, and he walked for 800 miles to bring this offering to Paul, and then I read verses 10 through 13, I might be a little tempted to be offended. It's like, because I could read 10 through 13 as, I didn't really need it. Okay, then why'd we give it? You know, so it's kind of like, I didn't really need it. I've learned to be content. I've got all that I need, kind of a thing. So I think it'd be easy to say, well, why did we sacrificially send somebody 800 miles to bring it to you if you didn't really need it? You know, and why is giving important anyway? And then I think in our text today, he answers the question. So I think he knows human nature, and he knows that those questions are going to come up. So then in verse 14, he says this, nevertheless, you have done well that you have shared in my distress. Now you Philippians know that also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only. For even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my necessities. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account. Indeed, I have all and abound. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma, an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. So he's talking about their giving here in verses 14 through 18. And what he does here is he really teaches us some important lessons on why we should give, why we should be givers. Now, right away, it's like, man, Pastor Mark, church was going so good, and now you're going to talk about giving. And I think it's important for us to understand that the Bible does talk a lot about giving, and I don't talk about it unless the Bible talks about it, and I don't talk about it unless we come across it. And this is an instance where we have to come across it. But you also need to change a little bit how you think when it comes to giving as well. And what I mean by that is, giving is all over the Bible. Okay, in the Gospels, 1 out of every 6 verses in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John deal with giving. They deal with money. Of the 29 parables that Jesus taught, 16 deal with our money and our possessions. In the New Testament, there are 500 verses on prayer. A lot of verses, right? There are less than 500 verses on faith, which is kind of surprising to me. And there are more than 2,000 verses about money. So we would say, that prayer is important and faith is important, but then we have over 2,000 verses on money. And Jesus talked more about money than he talked about heaven and hell combined. So it is a dominant theme in the Gospels. It's a dominant theme in the New Testament. And we see it over and over emphasized. In fact, Paul quotes in Acts chapter 20, he quotes what Jesus says, that it is more blessed to give than to receive. But man, I'm telling you right now, and I've done this long enough where when you start talking about giving, boy, it's like, I'm not listening to a word he's saying. He's stepping outside his territory and getting into business that he shouldn't get into, but it's in the Bible, so we need to talk about it. And I want to challenge you to be givers. And I'm just not talking about financially. I'm talking about give of yourself. I like the story. I heard this story this week about a guy. They were taking the offering. And they had these big plates, and this guy sat in his seat, and they were passing the plate, and they got to him, and he asked the guy to put it on the ground. And the guy stood in the plate, and he said, "This is all I got. But I'm giving God me." So immediately, a lot of times when we hear the term giving, we automatically think money. But giving is so much more than that. And Paul here makes the case why that we should give. There are 5 reasons, or 5 verses, and there's 5 reasons we see in the text. 1, why should I give? Why should I be a giver? Why should I be known as a giver? 1, givers are commended. Givers are commended in verse number 14. Nevertheless, you have done well that you have shared in my distress. Paul is saying, you did a good thing, okay? So he said, I didn't necessarily need it, but you have done well in that you have given. And I think one of the stereotypes that we got to get over a little bit in our culture is this concept that money is evil. Okay? The Bible does not say that money is the root of all kinds of evil. That's a very misquoted verse in the Bible. Money is not the root of all kinds of evil. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Okay, there's a big difference. And I think sometimes we have, in particular the Christian world, we have we demonize people who are wealthy. We demonize people who have a lot. We have decided how people should spend their money. Right? That this is what they should do. But God uses all kinds of people. He uses the wealthy and he uses the poor. He uses the powerful and he uses the insignificant. And I think it's a mistake when we kind of try to live other people's lives, and we do this a lot when it comes to money. Money in itself is not evil. Money is neutral. It all depends on how you use it. And if you want to use your money correctly, whether you have little or a lot, then one of the greatest ways that you can use your money in the right kind of way is to give it. Is to give it away, is to be a blessing to other people. Some of the most godly people in the Bible were the wealthiest, and God used their wealth to be a blessing to other people. I love what a guy I really respect said this in his pulpit, so I'm going to say it in mine. So if you, I hope this doesn't offend anybody. But he says this. He says, "Money is like manure. You stack it up, it stinks. You spread it around, it makes things grow." It's the truth. Your fertilizer is a lot of manure. Okay. The point is that it's good to be gracious. It's good to be not gracious. It's good to be gracious, but it's even better to be generous. It's a good thing. It's a commendable way to live. What makes somebody good? Well, what makes them good oftentimes is, are they givers? So that's the first thing. Number two, why should I give? Because givers are rare. Givers are rare. This verse really made me sad, honestly, when I read it, because it said, "Now you Philippians know also that in the beginning of the gospel, when I departed from Macedonia, no church shared with me concerning giving and receiving, but you only." That's kind of sad to me, because we think that, we look at people like Paul, and we look at people in the past, and we think, man, they were so different than us. No, they're exactly like us. They just lived in a different culture, a different time, a different environment. And most people at their core are very selfish. They care about themselves. And here was Paul, who is doing a good thing, man. He's getting the gospel out there. He's taking the gospel to the Gentiles. He's taking it to unreached people groups. And he goes, "There's only one church that helped me, and that was your church." The church in... Now, how many people did Paul help? How many people did he touch? How many people did he influence with the gospel? Yet only one church helped him. So what is he really saying? Givers are rare. Gallup, who is a very respectable organization as far as taking polls and finding out what people think. Gallup did a poll, and they went into churches and they asked people about their giving. 17% of people in the church say that they tithe. So 17% of people that attend a church say that they tithe. That's a pretty low number. But what Gallup found out is that of the 17% that say they tithe, only 3% actually do. So 3% of the congregation is actually tithing. 40% of people who come to a place of worship give nothing. Yet 91% of the people who come to a place of worship say that they make more money than they ever have. And 71% of the pastors that they talked to said that the congregation has moved now from giving out of a heart of stewardship and gratitude to now it's become in America a consumerism mentality. So people give, and they don't give out of gratitude to God. They give because, boy, I better have some say in something. Or I better have good seats, or you better take care of me. It's kind of the American mentality has crept into the church, where it's like, I'm going to give this, but you better give me a good product. And that's what's happened in the church. So if you want to be different, give. Give, because givers are rare. The easiest, most common thing in the world to do is to be selfish. Everybody's selfish. Everybody's looking out for themselves. Everybody's kind of protecting themselves. And what Paul is saying, what makes you guys unique, and what I love about you, is you gave to me. You're rare. And it's not that this church was loaded. They just had a generous heart. So why should I give? Because givers are commended. It's a good thing to be a giver. 2, because givers are rare. Number 3, because givers are appreciated. Givers are appreciated. Notice what he says in verse 16. "For even in Thessalonica, you sent aid once and again for my necessities." So when Paul thinks back on his life, what does he say? He says, man, I really appreciate that church at Philippi because they took care of me. They took care of my needs. Can I just tell you this? We remember the givers. We do. When I was a young kid, I've shared with you often that I was called to preach when I was 12. I began preaching when I was 13. And my wife's mother, my wife's grandmother, when I would preach, because you have to understand, you think the preaching's bad now, you should have been around 36 years ago. Okay? It was bad. It was bad. It was bad. And it's bad now. It was worse then. How about that? So the point is that, man, I was being an emotional guy and being, somebody that's easily offended kind of thing. I preach some horrible sermons. And you can always tell when somebody's doing the, hey, you did a good job. I'm saying this to encourage you so you won't quit. But my wife's grandmother every time I would preach, somebody would give me a little envelope, and on that little envelope, inside the envelope was a 3x5 card, and she wrote 2 words: keep preaching. And behind, what was more important to me, what was behind the note card was a $20 bill. Well, man, I mean, a $20 bill in 1980 something, man, that was like $100 now. I will never forget her. I didn't know who did it till she died. All I know is every time I preached, I knew I was getting $20. That's all I knew. I knew I was getting $20 from an anonymous person. And there would be a 3x5 card in there, and it would say, keep preaching. And somewhere in one of the tubs in my house, I have kept a lot of those cards. Keep preaching, keep preaching. And it was her way of trying to say, look, I know you stink right now, but keep going. Keep going, okay? And keep doing what God has called you to do. I will never forget her. Why will I never forget her? Because she was a giver. She's a giver. When we started this church in 1998, there was one church in Texas that sent us $100 a week. Or not week, that would be great. $100 a month. They sent us $100 a month for 1 year. It's the only church we got support from. We got one church, sent us $100 a month. I'll never forget that church. They knew we were starting out. They knew we didn't have anything. They knew everything was coming from the ground up, and they faithfully gave. You appreciate givers. You remember givers. We had a funeral yesterday. Larry Glasgow passed away this last week. We had his funeral yesterday. I got incredibly emotional. And I think that the hardest part about saying goodbye to people is that the givers are the hardest ones to say goodbye to. You appreciate so much what they have done for you, and you try to honor them when they're gone, and care for their family. And I guess my point is that, man, we really appreciate the givers. I like what Brennan Manning said. He says, in every encounter, we either give life or we drain it. There is no neutral exchange. Which are you? Givers are appreciated. And Paul is saying, man, I appreciate you guys. You cared for me over and over and over again. Who appreciates you? Who are you giving to? Who are you investing in? Because givers are appreciated. Number 4, givers are rewarded. Givers are rewarded. He goes, not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that abounds to your account. Everybody in the room understands investing, right? I mean, you don't have to know too much to know about investing. Maybe you have a job and you have a 401k and they're taking money out of your check and you're investing in your 401k. You're planning, you're prepping, you're preparing for the future. You're giving for this time where you can retire and live off of this income. you're following biblical principles. Proverbs 3, talks about, no, it's not Proverbs 3, but it talks about going to the ant and how that the ant prepares for winter, prepares for the future. But so you understand this concept of giving. I think a lot of times we need to change our mentality when it comes to giving to the church or giving to ministries that are getting the gospel out there. You are, in a sense, investing. You're investing. You're not investing for your entire retirement. You're investing for your future rewards in heaven. So when you give to missions, that money is taken and it's given to missionaries and it puts them on the field and they're reaching people that you would never be able to reach. But the thing you have to understand is you have a part in that. And so one of these days you're going to get to heaven and you're going to have somebody walk up to you and introduce themselves and say, I'm so-and-so, and I just want to thank you. What are you thanking me for? I've never met you in my life. Well, you helped support this missionary who came to my town or came to my village and shared the gospel with me, and I'm saved, and part of it is your contribution. How awesome is that going to be? I think heaven's just going to be this amazing where we're meeting somebody, and hey, isn't it crazy to you go somewhere and then you run into somebody that's from your town or something, you're like, oh man, this is a small world. I think heaven's going to be like it. Oh, we have this connection? But look, if you never give anything, you're not putting anything, your heaven's going to be great because you're there with Christ, but I just think the enjoyment is so much more if you actually contributed to people getting the gospel now. If you've ever given to this church, the people that have been reached as a result of this church, you may not have personally shared the gospel with them, but you had a part in it. So this is what Jesus talked about when he said, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So think future. Think future. In missions, some are goers, some are senders, but we're all partners. So it's important that we partner together. Maybe you don't have the desire to share you have the desire to share the gospel, but maybe you don't have the ability to share the gospel. You don't have the gifts to do that, but you can help somebody get there who can. Jim Elliot, I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He was a missionary that actually was trying to reach unreached people groups, and actually it cost him his life. His most famous statement is this: he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. So givers are rewarded. When you give, you're prepping for you are sending your reward ahead, just like you do when you invest. You're sending your future self a reward in the sense that I saved, I prepped, and you're doing that with giving. Number 5, why should we give? Givers are pleasing to God. Givers are pleasing to God. Indeed, I have all and abound. This is verse 18. I am full, having received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you. Notice how he describes it. A sweet-smelling aroma. So on my FedEx route, I don't go to this stop often, but I have to go to this stop occasionally. Stonehouse Animal Hospital on Fairlawn. I have to go in there. Now, we have a cat in our house, but I'm not used to the dog, cat, animal smells, And man, it is strong in that building. So they don't have it up at the counter for me. I have to walk in the door and I have to make a dash to the back, and I'm like holding my breath the entire time. Because literally I've walked to the back and they're doing surgery on some dog right there, and I'm like, I don't even want to see this, So I don't, when I get a notification on my power pad and it says you have to go to Stonehouse Animal Hospital, I'm like, ugh. Why is that? Because it's not a sweet smelling aroma. It stinks. Okay, if you work there, I'm sorry. The point is that But last night we, Karen and I were doing a lot of running around, and I said, hey, let's stop at the grocery store on the way home, and let's pick up some steaks, and let's grill tonight. Is there anything better than a steak on a grill? And so Karen just said, I'm going to go outside and just smell it. Right? It's that sweet smelling aroma, I don't want to be the Stonehouse Animal Hospital to God. I want to be the steaks on the grill. I want to be that sweet smell, and that's what he's saying. You are a sweet smelling. When God, in a sense, sees the sacrifices that you have made, it pleases him. I want to be pleasing to God more than anything else. And I think of Jesus when he was baptized, right? He comes up out of the water. What did God say? The Spirit, it said the Spirit descended, the heavens opened, and he said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am. Why was he pleased? What was Jesus doing right there? He was completely giving of himself. Nobody has ever given more than Jesus gave, right? Left heaven, came to earth, gave up everything. Gave up his Godhead in the sense that he humbled himself and was fully God but fully man. Went through everything that we have dealt with everything that we have had to face, and so he has given up himself for us. And when God looked at Jesus and saw what he was doing, he said, "This is my beloved Son, and I am well pleased with him." Man, I want to be that way to God, don't you? You know who God's pleased with? Givers. Givers are pleasing to God. The highest reason to do anything is to please God. The highest reason. So, be a giver. This is just my case. This is my case out of Philippians 4 to you. Be a giver. Be responsible, be smart, be good with your money, all of that. It's not, it's so many people are get so angry with this. It's even like, I pray that your spirit is not disturbed by it. But I'm not talking just about money. I'm talking about just giving in general. What do you do for other people? How do you invest your life in others? What do you give to others? Do you give time to others? Do you give effort to others? Do you give energy to others? Or is everything revolve around you? That's just the formula for a miserable existence. It is more blessed to give than to receive. So when you give, it is a good thing. It is commended. Givers, why should we give? Because givers are rare. There's not many givers in the world. Most people are takers. Givers are appreciated. We miss the givers when they're gone. We appreciate their sacrifices. Givers are rewarded. God sees your gift and will reward you. And that's the thing, you got to be okay with not getting your reward till you get to heaven. And that's the hang up with a lot of people. I want to see the reward now. Well, it doesn't work that way. You'll see it someday, just not right now. And then givers are pleasing to God. And man, when you know that you're living a life that pleases to God, it brings you joy. That's why I think this is in here. It's very difficult to find people that give a lot who are miserable. Now, I have met a ton of hoarders who are miserable. They're miserable because they're taking ownership of everything. And what has to happen in our lives is we have to acknowledge, okay, everything I got is a gift from God. So if God asked me to give it away, or God asked me to do this, this is all a gift from him. So I'm just the steward of the gift that God's given me. But when I take ownership of it, and I think this stuff is mine, or these things are mine, it's just really a negative place to be. So be a giver. Be a giver. because you are never more like Jesus Christ than when you give. For God so loved the world that he gave. What's the greatest way that you show love? Giving, giving, giving. I love you, so I give to you. I love you, so I give to you. I love you, God, so I give to you. That's the greatest reason to give. All right? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. With our heads bowed, how did God speak to you today? Have you held tightly to stuff that is God's? Would you pray in your seat where you are? God, open my eyes to opportunities to be a blessing to others. Forgive me, Father, for always just thinking about myself. Let's be givers, not takers. Lord, thank you for your goodness to us. Thank you for your kindness to us. We're so blessed in this country in so many ways. But I am afraid that it's made all of us quite selfish. We hoard and we grab and we look out for ourselves. And you didn't teach us to live that way. You taught us to be generous, to be like you, to be generous, to give of ourselves, if that's even what's necessary. Because greater love has no man than this, and he laid down his life for his friends. So Lord, help us to be givers. Help us to follow your example. Thank you, Lord, for the people who have given in the past to make what we have in the present possible. So Lord, I pray that we leave here today changed, that we leave here today different, with a different mindset, a different perspective. And trusting your word and taking confidence in your word that if you give and it will be given to us. So Lord, help us to live this kind of life. Thank you, Jesus, for modeling it. We're grateful for all you've done and what you will do. And we pray this all in your wonderful name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to our series on Philippians with Pastor Mark Doss. If you have questions about today's message, please contact our church office at info@topekabaptist.org. Give us a call at 785-862-0988 or check us out online at topekabaptist.org.